I was just going to mention something to you that last week when we were in Chicago, I was hanging with a good friend of mine who's a hockey player, and his name is Chris Chelios, and I know. You're only booing him because he beat you. That's it. But he's retired now. He can't hurt you anymore. But we were. It came up about this tragic accident that happened with the Gaudreau brothers, and I just wanted to say that, I lost my brother 5 years ago, and something that was very immediate and traumatic. Jeff Ament lost one of his great friends in a similar fashion, and Chris told me it was even more. What made it even more tragic is that they were such good men. So hearing that they came from Philly and grew up watching games in this city, we thought we'd recognize them and wish their family and loved ones and teammates strength to get through. It's a difficult time. So this one's for Johnny. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking camera in the truck. Mr. Boom Gasper! You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
everybody now. Welcome to Live on Four Legs, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. We, at this point, have just finished up the tour. As we're recording, we haven't done Fenway yet, so at least there's a little bit more to look forward to as we are in the process of recording this. But officially unofficial at this point that you're listening, the tour is unfortunately over. But there are still things that we can talk about, going back to Philly and Baltimore, I suppose. And then next week we can jump back into Fenway conversation. But that won't be the topic of the episode. The topic of the episode is going to be Calgary 2011. And the reason why we picked this one, well, overall, we wanted to do one of the Canadian shows on this leg from 2011 because we have not really done them justice. We did one show that was Saskatoon, and there are about like 8 or 9 in the bunch that we have to get to. So this one is appropriate for this week because of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, who were tragedy killed by a drunk driver while riding their bicycles in New Jersey. And, it just sad moment for the hockey community, and everybody in both Columbus and Calgary were grieving his death, and the Gaudreau family will be very, very missed. And it was an idea I believe Bradley brought up to us to do Calgary for that reason, and I wholeheartedly agree. And there's going to be some hockey talk in the show as well, so this episode is dedicated to their memory, the Gaudreau brothers. So that's a good enough reason as any to do an episode. And we'll be talking about 2011. It might be a year that outside of PJ20 you might gloss over a little bit, but there are some interesting aspects for this show, including a band that had announced previously that day that they were hanging up the boots. Let's get into it. Randy Sobel's over here, John Farrar over there.
Hello, hello. I was not familiar with Johnny Gaudreau, I have to admit. I haven't been keeping up with my hockey the last 10 or 15 years, but when it came up at the show the other day, I was doing the Concertpedia and I kind of looked it up because I wanted to, put a link to it for posterity, so people would know. And got to reading about it. Yeah, just an awful story, man, with his brother and supposedly the brother was a really nice guy too. Everybody just talked about how warm and generous and kind they were.
Yeah.
It's just one of those just unimaginable tragic things that happens.
Yeah. It's just all the things that you read about the family and like what they went through because it was their sister's wedding weekend. Like literally the next day or the day after their sister was going to get married and they were in the wedding party. And when you think of that and how devastating it was for the family, and I'm sure that they're still every day, their wives, their kids, their mom, and dad, and it's unthinkable. It's unimaginable. This was a player that I remember that I called Johnny Guitar Hockey for a long time because everybody was calling him Johnny Hockey, and Johnny Guitar does show up in the show, as a matter of fact. So I just was like, okay, well, nobody's going to get my reference, so he's Johnny Guitar Hockey to me. And it was one of those things where anytime he came up, he was always a fantasy hockey guy. I played fantasy hockey for a little bit and just, yeah, like good representation for US hockey too, which is really, really important to the build of what this country's hockey has become over the past years, and it keeps growing and growing. And he was certainly a building block and all that. And can't say enough how much they will be missed. So, as I mentioned before, what we're going to get out of this show, that's a big theme here, is that this was the day that R.E.M., legendary alternative band that were pioneers for what they did, one of the first bands that got popular and famous off of college radio. And then throughout their career, they kept turning out hit song after hit song after hit album. And they were extremely influential in the music business, especially to this band, to Pearl Jam. And after 31 years, they called it a career. And it wasn't until recently where we got to see them again. So what do you remember about that day when they called it quits?
They just put out kind of a statement. I think it was in the morning or the early afternoon that was like, hey, we decided it's run its course. We done what we needed to do and we don't feel like we need to do anymore. So we're going to quit now. They were just one of those bands that you expected would just go and go and go until they could barely stand up on stage. Like they would be one of those bands like the Rolling Stones, where you would see them in their 60s on stage because they were just those guys, like they'd been together forever. But just out of the blue one day, just put out that statement. Like I remember living in Georgia, growing up here, like that was a big part of it. And like I lived in Athens for a few years in college. So like texting people and talking to people, it's like, oh man, what a surprise. But I guess you have to respect just going out on your own terms like that. They just woke up and were like, hey, I think we're done. And, they have since reunited in the last few months. They played a one-off thing for the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, played Losing My Religion, but I think that's going to be it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because you're right. So many bands want to hang on to that for so long in ways that are positive and ways that are negative. And the positive ways being that they love being out there. The more negative ways, look, a lot of bands stick together because they know that this is where their finances are coming from. And while I say negative, it's less of like, oh, a bad thing and more of like, okay, maybe they don't love this like some other bands kind of love this. There are always those bands that tour in that fashion, but you rarely hear of a band that had been around for 30 years own it and say, it's time. And I remember that being a huge surprise to me too, because when I was thinking about it, obviously growing up with them, huge part of my evolution and enjoying music. Maybe Monster was one of the first albums that I had my own copy of, and I listened to it until I couldn't listen to it anymore. As I got older, it was really automatic for the people that really stuck with me, but also Document and Green. Green was the one that I really liked when I was young. Out of Time's a terrific record. It's just one of those bands that, yeah, you definitely thought they were kind of invincible. You thought that they would go on forever. And yet, when you look back 13 years later, it almost has this happy ending that, they did do everything that they needed to do. And there was no like stone left unturned. You know what I mean? Like when they came back and they did that performance, which is spectacular. It was enough to say these guys still appreciate the music, but I didn't feel the need more from that. Like I didn't need a tour. I didn't
Yeah.
need them to create new music. It was a satisfying way to end that I can ever think of another band having.
And it wasn't done with a lot of hype. Like I think they were doing like a CBS interview that morning, even up to that morning, they were like, "Yeah, I don't think we're gonna play." Like kind of playing it coy, and just a local thing here, like the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, just get up and do a song. And I think like the members had been on stage together. I know what's the actor's name, Michael something, who was doing touring with like an R.E.M tribute show, like when they
Didn't
played
he
Athens.
do? Yeah, he did one of the records live.
Yeah, they were doing
Forget
Murmur.
which one? Murmur. Yeah.
And when they played at the 40 Watt in Athens, like all the members got on stage together, but they didn't do a song. So that kind of ignited some talk about like, oh, they're together, like something might happen. But it's kind of the anti Oasis. It wasn't like built up with a bunch of hype and like we're gonna play these huge shows and then we're back, and this whole thing was just like, here, we're just gonna do this one little thing, play this one song just for old time's sake, just to get together and kind of say we did it, and then we'll go back to living our lives and doing our own thing.
Yeah, they're a band that never wanted to put attention on themselves. A lot of other people put attention on them, but they were fairly humble rock stars, if you know what I
Sure.
mean. They
Well, aside from Mike Mills and his suits, but that's another story.
I just heard a great Mike Mills story that I don't think I can repeat on this podcast, but I will say how fantastic it was. That if you need a wingman, Mike Mills is apparently your guy. But yeah, at one point, Bill Berry had left the band. I think this was
Yeah.
after New Adventures in Hi-Fi, and it felt like they still stuck around and they were still going in their own direction and figuring out what they wanted to do with it, but like they never felt like a tabloid band. It never felt like people were out to get Michael Stipe's attention.
A little bit of this, like when the sexuality was an issue back in the 90s, when it was like who's gay, who's not gay, who's bi, who's this,
Yeah.
whatever. There was a little bit of that around that time, but I mean they were able to kind of ride that wave kind of similarly to what Pearl Jam did, and like come out the other side of it relatively unscathed. You mentioned Bill Berry, who like fucked off and went to be a farmer.
Right.
Um, but, they survived for 10, 12, 13 more years, put out some more pretty good records, that just goes to show the strength of those guys and the songwriting that they had. But so many just classic songs and so many eras. Like you can divide up their career into these blocks, like the first three records and then the middle period, the 90s, and then after Bill Berry left, and like they were able to kind of have this career. And I think they were a big influence on Kurt. People talk about that, like they were going to work together, and if they had been able to get together, maybe things would have been different. But I know, Ed speaks about them very reverently as well, as being this kind of like one of those guideposts that like this is how you do it. You focus on the music and you get through it and you stick together as a band and you come out the other side. And after that announcement, I remember thinking like, oh, this is probably how Pearl Jam is going to do it. It's just going to be one day out of the blue. They're just going to be like, yep, we're done. We did everything we wanted to do, and we're going to end it on our own terms. And it hasn't happened yet. Hopefully we got a few more good years left. But I got to think that Ed made a mental note at that point to be like, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I'm actually really intrigued to see how it happens. One side of me says, yeah, they would want to go out gracefully. The other side of me says that they would want to get people the last opportunity to see them and do a full goodbye tour, even if it was just a couple of cities. It's tough to say. It's really tough to say because, yeah, they're a band. They have achieved everything to this point. I think they're, only a couple years older than R.E.M. was when they hung it up. So they achieved everything they set out to achieve. The only difference is, I guess, that they still just genuinely love making music together and they love going out on tour. And I think that might be a little bit of the difference here. I don't know or have any predictions on how really, but it's tough to say because I think that the love for it is certainly going to be a factor in trying to tug of war with the decision. I really don't know. So why don't we get into the show here? I think there's not a lot of tee up going into it. Again, it's right after PJ 20 in this September little run here. And it was in the middle of Backspacers, so they weren't necessarily touring for Backspacer, but it's interesting going back on that 2005 tour as well, and this kind of being not as meaty as that 2005, but really, the last time that they really did this specifically Canada tour. They have not done just a Canadian tour since this point. And from listening to some of these shows, you think to yourself, well, they're able to do it. Why can't we see it happen? And it gives places like Calgary and Edmonton and Winnipeg another chance. Calgary was able to kind of break out of that. They had a show 2 years later, but the rest of them kind of didn't. So who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what the future kind of holds for them? And that's where we're going to get into the show right now. We're going to open up with a song that opened up the first night of PJ 20 during this year, and that would be, Release. Now, going back to the storyline that we have for this episode, there's an Oh Dear Michael added in this, and it's not like last week where you really felt like there were a lot of decisions made within paying tribute to Lou Reed, but little subtle things. I think Release was definitely something that was on the minds, but it's not all show that's like a complete R.E.M. tribute show.
Right. And I think Release, too, is one of the early songs that, that's a Peter Buck influence, I think, on Stone. This feels like something that could have been an R.E.M. song around that kind of late 80s, early 90s period. Because, Release, they save it for those big moments. And I think he wanted to go out and kind of make a statement with it and, come out with something that was going to be a little bit more emotional and bring out some things.
Oh, dear Michael, how can you see us now? Why am myself like you? Somehow I'll wait up in the dark for you to speak to me. I've opened up, release me, release me.
come out of that, we're going to start the show with back-to-back album openers on back-to-back albums. Go, Last Exit, and following that, Given a Fly. Immediately, you're getting some energy injected into the set. I love the combo for sure. And especially Given a Fly, it felt like Given a Fly had a lot of really good crowd reaction, especially at the tail end, like right as they were finishing the song before Ed's about to speak. The crowd is just very uplifted here. And Canadian crowds are very good, and some of them are sneaky, really good. And as Ed would say during the show, he usually says the thing he always says, hey, we'll be back here soon. Well, as I mentioned, he liked the crowd so much that he was back there, and they haven't returned because, well, they're afraid of snowstorms again. Don't book a December Calgary show, people. Come on. That should be rule number one. But what'd you think of this little section here?
I like Last Exit. The solo in Last Exit was a little different. Mike seemed like he was trying to do something a little bit different melodically with it, and I think it worked really well. And then Cameron, very impressive on the fills and the pounding there at the end of Last Exit. I thought that was the highlight of this little section for me.
Shed my skin at last. One second.
Ed says here, well, on behalf of the group, to be able to come here and play this part of the world, and not just to play here, but we know that for you guys, it's like playing in church at all these hockey arenas across the country. We're happy to be in your church, and it's almost like this strange fetish about wanting, like, normally I wouldn't want to go to church, but going to church with Mudhoney is actually pretty exciting for us. So thanks, Mudhoney. And then he says, this is one about a guy who used to be in the group. So clearly it is a Lucan and then into insignificance moment in this little combo here. It was a good attempt for Lucan. He ran out of gas a little bit at the end, but some of those lyrics were pretty crisp and concise. I give him a little credit for this one.
Sounded good. It wasn't like a breakneck speed Lucan. He wasn't just spitting out syllables. He was able to kind of get some of the words out and get through it pretty well.
Now, I don't know how many times Lucan and Insignificance, the transition seemed a little bumpy. It seemed like they didn't know how to execute it that well.
Yeah, the opening of Insignificance is a little tough to like pair with something. It almost needs to be its own thing. It's going to be hard to go straight from anything like right into Insignificance because it's such a unique way to open. It's not like a Corduroy or a Wygo where you can kind of transition into it seamlessly.
Yeah, this was the last time they did it, so I guess they realized that, okay, maybe it doesn't work from here on out. But they did it a couple times in 2000 and 2003, and then once in 2005 as well. So, look, Insignificance is one of those songs you kind of snap into it and needs to go right away. And I think the guitars were just a little bit late on it. And if they were on time, they could have made something happen. But I think there are a lot of moments in this show where you can look to it and be like, let's talk about what happened in Philly, or in this case, what didn't happen in Philly. Man, I was so bummed seeing that set list afterwards and seeing Insignificance crossed off for once. I hadn't seen the song in so long, and that set needed a song like that. I get why they put once in. I think that they just needed the crowd to come alive a little bit. Not saying that it was a bad crowd at all, but it's hard not to compare it with the Saturday crowd. And although Insignificance, I think, could have done that for a lot of the big fans, Once would do that for everybody. So, I don't know. I'm bummed it's still on my list of wanting to see it again. And hopefully, as we speak right now, I don't know if future Randy is going to have to kick in here or what, but hopefully they have made good on that for Fenway Park. But this is a good version too. So Cameron at the end has that little rumble build up, and they come down pretty thunderous at the end there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the cross-offs have come back. We saw Alone get played after it was crossed off and things like that, so it could happen. But, yeah, I mean, Insignificance would be huge. I mean, it's only been played once since that binaural show in Toronto in 2016. That was last year in St. Paul, so that was definitely a surprise to see on that set list. And, yeah, maybe just got cold feet on it at the last minute. Didn't feel like they were 100% on it. But, yeah, hoping they can work on it and it gets played, because that's one that should never go away for too long. It's always very, very good.
All right, so Ed says we want to send a shout out to a good friend. And I don't know about this part of the country, but there are surfers in Canada. You even have your own magazine called Canadian Surfing. Through activist work that we participated in through Surf Rider, we've talked about Surf Rider before, there was a break called Trestles in California that they wanted to build a freeway right through. And we were successful and got a big coalition of people that were successful in blocking that. And just when you think you can't change the world, you can. So there was a big contest there that Kelly Slater won, and this is to him. Of course, Kelly Slater won a surfing contest. Like, are there any other surfers almost? Like, I mean, it's like saying in circa 1998 through 2006, Tiger Woods won a PGA match. Of course he did. He was the most dominant golfer of that time. But yeah, so interesting. And I'm glad there was some clarity to that, because when you look at the set list and you see that Big Wave is there, you're like in the middle of the prairies. I don't know if Calgary is legitimately the prairies, but
yeah, for sure. It's like considered the Midwest of Canada. I mean, you look at the arena is called the Saddle Dome. Like, it's considered like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Canadians, but I think it's like considered like the Texas of Canada. It's like where the Cowboys are and stuff.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm trying to envision, like, I feel like I've seen Flames fans wearing cowboy hats before. So
Sure.
If that's my connection and, the way that I can process that, then I guess I get that. But yeah, Saddle Dome, I'm going to guess that they have a lot of rodeos there, and that's probably why they call it that. But yeah, a Big Wave comes in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Who would have thought that? Big Wave into Unthought Known into Even Flow. And it had been 2 years since they had played Big Wave. And while there are some little rough patches in the waves, the caution flags are out there. Overall, I love the performance, because the character that Ed puts on and the excitement that comes out of his voice, you can tell that he's pretty spirited during this. And when you cover a song so seldom, sometimes you think that the band seems like they're not into it just because they're trying to focus and they're trying really not to fuck up that badly. But Ed kind of throws that idea out the window, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to rock with this. talked about, that little break at the end when they kind of delve a little bit has gotten into darkness in some of those versions. It's gotten kind of a little bit dark. And this one doesn't, but it does feel like it keeps lighthearted enough to get into Unthought Known with still being a little weird. The performance is really good. This might be one of the better Big Wave performances that I can remember.
But it is such a weird song. I mean, you talked about Lucan going into insignificance. Insignificance into Big Wave is one of the just weirdest on paper transitions you can think of. Like, you would never imagine those two songs being played together. And like, yeah, I mean, Big Wave's only been played 4 times since this show in 13 years. It hasn't been played since 2016, again, in Canada, in Ottawa, which is another little weird coincidence. But surprised, kind of, it didn't come back, but it's another one of those just weird kind of mid-era Pearl Jam songs that probably are done. I mean, I think if they even tried to play this, it'd probably be a train wreck. Sorry to a former co-host of the show it's his favorite song.
Yeah, it is one of those, like, hey, didn't realize the song exists, especially when
Yeah.
you don't listen to Avocado a whole lot and
Yeah.
it pops in, you're like, oh, all right. Yeah, I forget that they do this. And there's another Avocado
Yeah.
song that fits that bill that's going to be played later in this show, too. Both of those songs are nice, welcome surprises here. And, I thought that Matt was a little bit like past that until MSG when he mentioned it about like 5 times. So he's
Yeah.
not over it. He
Yeah.
will probably fight you on that. And yeah, Big Wave for life. Unthought Known and Even Flow. I thought that Jeff sounded terrific on Unthought Known. It's just little things. He's just keeping that tempo going. But again, you can really hear Jeff at the show very, very well. And then Even Flow, there was one thing on Even Flow that I'm just like Stone, and I know that Javier can really explain this well, that Stone, there's probably that C word that we talk about sometimes, that compression sound coming out of his guitar. And again, he can explain that a little bit better, but it felt really contained instead of allowing that rhythm to bounce off the walls. And I think that kind of affected my enjoyment of Mike's solo as well. And I don't think that this was one of the craziest Mike Even Flow solos. It sounded pretty much like the standard affair that you were getting at that time, but I think Stone needs to be prominent in that and needs to reverberate a little bit for Mike to really work in the way that you like Mike work.
I've kind of found a new appreciation for the song because of discovering these little alternate riffs that Stone is throwing in under the solo, because he goes completely, again, off of what you think of as the Even Flow riff. Normally, we're used to hearing just that dun 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 dun. Like, he will just repeat that in the original in the early days, but here he's doing something different. It's like a dun 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 dun, like a more accented riff. It sounds completely different, and kudos to Mike for being able to not let that throw you, because like when the rhythm guitar is changing from what you're used to, it can kind of throw you off because, again, your accents are different. Like, he's used to hitting that solo and hitting those notes in a way that kind of meshes with what Stone is doing. But when Stone changes, the way they play together is just like so seamless. They just have this understanding together that it still just works, and it's very impressive.
I'm on the same page as you, I think, with a ton of songs that Stone comes through really clearly on. And that's kind of why I was a little disappointed here. And it might be the era. I know this is another era that Javier just hates. Anything that's backspacer, the way that the sound is projected, he just can't stand. It just felt like he was boxed in, and it felt like he should have been off the walls a little bit more. But that doesn't take away from the what that he was doing, put it that way. Ed, in between Even Flow and Deep, says, in the old days when we only had 9 songs to play, this was usually one of them. But over the years, we haven't played it as much, so we're going to try it here. And then he says, hope there is a young man named Sean out there to hear it. Now, this is interesting because Deep gets the Sean shout out, but then when Deep goes into light years, that also at the beginning he says this goes out to Sean too. I'm interested here to know because Deep and Light Years are two completely different songs, and to give somebody a double dedication like that, it seemed like at the end of Light Years, especially, that they were mourning him. And I don't know if it's a situation where, he talked about Deep before as being a song that he saw somebody shooting up heroin on a windowsill and basically tailored the song to that. And I don't know if this was a drug induced death or something like that.
Well, good news, because I did find the story of Sean. Somebody had posted on the forums on the fan views. The guy's name is Nothing Man 4. Wrote, "My cousin Sean was the inspiration for myself and the rest of my family to get into this band. He was the oldest cousin of ours and opened our eyes to this religion that we call Pearl Jam. He passed away in 2007 and it was devastating to our family. My brother and I ran into Mike early that day and had a nice chat with him about the city, jobs, and the river. Before he left, I explained to him what I said above and told him that Deep was Sean's favorite song and that he never got to hear it live and that we were wondering if there was any chance they could play it tonight while all of our cousins were at the show. Not only did they play it as well as dedicate it to Sean, they did the same with Light Years as well." So there you go. That was his favorite song, and nice of them to get that with all their family there.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, sad that he's, been long gone, but I'm glad it wasn't a drug issue or
Yeah.
anything like that. But like again, I think the fact of getting not one but two songs dedicated in your name is
Mhm.
not something that happens. It doesn't even happen to celebrities. Let's just put it that way. So, you're thinking a certain way about that, and that was pretty special for that family, I'm sure. This version of Deep really at the end, Ed's mentioning back when they only played like 9 songs, it really felt like Ed was trying to channel some of that 1991 aggression. He had this like sort of snarly growl to it.
Like the view. She doesn't like the view. She doesn't like the view. But he saves himself free. Can't toss the bottom into the bed. Can't toss the bottom. Can't toss the bottom the bed.
It was channeling something, and maybe a little bit of that kind of was like, hey, if Sean, you're listening to this somewhere, this is unfortunately what you missed, so we're gonna give you a little bit of extra juice on it, or telling this family they'll get a performance specifically for them. But Lightyear sounded terrific as well. I thought that they really attacked it in a way, again, where something is on their minds, and not knowing what the full situation of Sean was when listening to this, but understanding it now. Yeah, they are coming from a place where they're feeling something on it, and it sounds like that dedication rang throughout the song. It was very good.
Even at the end, he's singing, instead of just doing the vocalizing, he's singing "Oh Sean" at the end, kind of adding some personalization to the lyrics there. Is very good.
So Daughter's going to follow up those two. Daughter tag gets really, really good crowd involvement here. It goes from Blitzkrieg Bob tag and then good call and response
Mm.
going back and
He's
forth.
testing him. He's giving him the A+ stuff.
Oh, sure. And as the song ends, the crowd just continues the pattern, and you can hear this is where we're going to get the true dedication. You can hear Ed saying, "If you believe." So that's a nice little throw in for anybody paying attention. I don't know if it counts as a tag on Live Footsteps. I think it's too short to even make a mention
No,
of, but
I think it
yeah.
should.
You think it should?
Dave, he doesn't have anything tagged. I think it should be Blitzkrieg Bop and Man on the Moon. Yeah, because it
Well,
felt like he
Blitzkrieg Bop for
wanted to
sure.
do. Yeah, it felt like he wanted to do more, but the band just ended it. It felt like he was ready to go off and do some more Man on the Moon, but song ended.
If you believe,
Ed is going to get into this now, and you can tell just in the tenor of his voice how much this is affecting him, because this is a group of people that he truly respects and loves. And it's kind of like how, if the news of Pearl Jam breaking up would come to us, like we would
Yeah, it
feel a
was a
certain way
shock.
about this as well. Yeah. You sure make it feel pretty good standing up here. Huge ovation during this whole thing. It's helping because it didn't start out to be, well, we got some news from friends of ours, and it made for a tricky beginning to the day. We just want to acknowledge how important they were to us as a group, being from America, one of the best bands from the United States in decades. I don't know if you've heard, but our friends, after 31 years, R.E.M., have decided to put it down for a while. I can't even say it. I first saw them in 1984, and then a couple of those guys moved to Seattle, and they feel a part of our musical community. So here's to R.E.M., our support and love to them and their future happiness, and I'm going to try something here.
this is not a barrel. This isn't a terrible. This isn't a terrible thing. Yes, he will rhyme that after all he's done today, he has earned his wings. It happened today, hooray, hooray. It happened, hip, hip, hooray. We'll leave the allegories to another Bible story out of defense their choice.
A little bit of background on It Happened Today. This Ed was on the recording of, and this is a fairly recent song at the time on the record.
Oh yeah, it's
right before
from Collapsing to
broke up.
now. Yeah, their current record, right?
Right. And it's interesting. I know it has the tie with Ed, but it's interesting that they go to a song like this, and I'm sure, it's the equivalent of Gigaton or Dark Matter in their catalog, that
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't going to be paying attention to the new R.E.M. stuff because it's not their height and their prime. But this is truly a terrific song, and one of those moments where it would feel a little too obvious to do like Everybody Hurts or Losing My Religion or something like that. But since there is the tie with Ed, and it is truly just one of their great late era songs, not only does the performance work so well, but they kind of put a little bit of flair to it. Ed's on stage doing probably the first half of the song. It's just a red spotlight, and the band is in complete darkness before the lights come up and you see the entire band that joins in. And then once they accelerate into the song and you hear Ed really start to harmonize on those vocals, you can feel that is where they're channeling all of their frustration and disappointment into this song and giving them one last thank you for everything you've done.
title, like it happened today. R.E.M. broke up today, like that fits perfectly. But doing this one, I think, gives it a little more. I mean, that's what Pearl Jam does. Like, they search for the deep cut. They pull through, go through the weeds and find the gem hidden in the forest. And I think this is one of those songs. I don't think it would have been as special if they had done one of the quote-unquote hits in R.E.M.'s catalog.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they were looking for the right song, not a song. Had they have done a hit, it just would have been like, oh, let's just play R.E.M. But that's not the point. The point was to pay homage. The point was to thank them. The point was for Pearl Jam to create a moment out of it. And, you know, although it would be great, you know, Ed has covered Drive on his solo tours, they picked the song for the moment. They picked the song for the moment. It sounded like they picked the right song. So he says afterwards, to Michael, Mike, Peter, and Bill, Burtis, and Scott, we love you. So that'll get us into Setting Forth. That is tag team with Corduroy right here. Hey, after not seeing Setting Forth in quite a while, we get in back-to-back weeks. This is usually kind of what happens on this program. A late set Corduroy kind of erases some of that heaviness that the R.E.M. moment has. And even going back to Light Years, which is another heavy song, kind of played in the mid-set.
Sure.
Now we're back to having a little bit of fun. Mike's solo is really different. I was not expecting him to play something very effect heavy and open like that. It was a moment where I really wanted him to sort of shatter everybody's soul, and it just didn't work out that way. What did you think of that? Because it didn't really hit like most Corduroy solos do for me.
Yeah, maybe he was kind of caught up in some of the feelings and trying to maybe channel some of that Monster era R.E.M. where they were using those effects and pedals and things like that. But he can do that. He can pull out a shredding solo and blow your face off at any time. But when he chooses to like restrain it and do something else, whether it's like melodically or effects heavy, like we talked about, the last Exit solo was really different. So maybe he was just kind of in a different mood at this show. It wasn't in Stevie Ray Vaughan mode.
So we're going to end the main set here with Brain of J. Very traditional here. Brain of J, Johnny Guitar, and Alive. Now, Brain of J and Johnny Guitar are relevant. You probably all know why Brain of J is relevant. Very few of you know why Johnny Guitar is relevant, but we'll get into both, starting with Brain of J. Now, I went through the whole story on the reaction episode. I recapped the whys and the feels and the thoughts. And now you got almost a week here that you can kind of go back and think about it a little bit. And since that moment, I feel so complete within my fandom. That was the one thing I was truly missing that tied everything together. You know, it's because it's a part of you in a way. Like, yes, I am an unabashed song chaser, and I've been for most of my Pearl Jam fandom, but since doing this podcast, my chase has more been find ways to impress me within the set, find a structure that's going to work within the whole entire show, and a story and a balance with the story. And I'm into those kind of shows. If they play common songs within that and make it work, you know, if they tell stories that lead to a song and it is incredible, I'm going to enjoy that as much as I'm going to enjoy the song that's been played like 7 times. So this was the last one that I really felt like a holy shit kind of moment gone through me. And granted, there are still a ton of songs that I have not seen that I would love to see. But I don't think that there is another one of these moments that I have left in me. And that, to me, going into the Monday show, there wasn't any like, oh, well, they could do this, they could do that. I was just like, they're going to put on a show, and I'm just going to sit here and not think about it. I'm going to enjoy it. It changes your fandom when something like this happens. It really does.
Yeah, it was a long time coming. When they went into it, I mean, you saw the reactions of everybody on the Facebook group and everything.
And you didn't know right away because you didn't have a feed up. So when I
Right.
texted you, I expected that you knew what was going on, and I was just reacting in a way that I reacted to everybody. But did you think I was lying to you or something?
A little bit. I thought you might have been trolling a little bit, but it was quickly confirmed once we pulled the stream up. But that's what this band does. They give you those moments when you think that you're never going to get it, and you just show up one night, and that's going to be the night, you know?
Right. For all you Baltimore people out there, it's funny because Baltimore, within the 3 shows that I went to and the one that I will be going to at this point that we're recording this, Baltimore was the one I decided to skip. And had I not done that, would have got that Can't Keep opener we were all waiting for. And that's a great song to chase, and that would be very exciting to hear, but it wouldn't make my fandom like Brain of J does. It would just be an exciting part of the set. But I think what gets lost in talking about that is how fucking insane that version was. They were really on fire with it. You don't recognize it when you're trying to pick yourself up off the floor in pieces, literally pieces. I needed about 5 songs to truly collect myself. I don't think that I found myself fully invested back into the set until Do the Evolution. And that was like after Even Flow. So it took a while, but to kind of connect it with this version, this one is another one where they were right on top of it too. It is definitely for me, and granted I'm on a huge high with it and probably won't get off that high for a very, very long time. This was a very, very good version of it as well. But now, as it pertains to Johnny Guitar, do you want to know why Johnny Guitar is relevant, John?
No, but you're going to tell me anyway.
Okay. So, obviously, we did Pearl Jam karaoke in Philly. And we didn't have too many people singing along. A couple people here and there, but there were a lot of people that were kind of bar locals that weren't Pearl Jam people that just kind of went and did their own thing. So, towards the middle end of the night, I was thinking, because I made the list of Pearl Jam songs, and I remember all of Backspacer was on that list. And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to troll everybody that's here right now, and I'm going to sing Johnny fucking Guitar. And guess what, John? It might be one of the worst songs in their catalog, but I fucking had a great time singing this.
You got to play it up. Like, the reason he be smiling known to him. Like,
Totally.
You gotta get rid
And asleep with the light on. Yeah, like, it was fun. And I don't think I've ever had that much fun listening to the song before. And even at one point where I just totally got off track with the lyrics, I think I just blurted out. I think I said, I don't ever fucking listen to this song because it's a dumb song. So this here in Calgary was 17 out of 17, the last performance to date. Obviously, they don't know what to do with it since it's going to be the go-between to get to a live. But, yeah, I mean, look, I don't think I'll be too disappointed if they decide out of the blue someday that Johnny Guitar's coming back. You know, that'd be kind of fun. Although the song, the song sucks.
Would it?
Yeah, I think it would.
I mean,
Olay would not be fun, but Johnny Guitar would.
Yeah, I mean, I'll lay it out there. You know, Olay is my least favorite Pearl Jam song. This is number 2. It just doesn't do anything for me. I think it's just not something that they need to be doing. But my personal opinion, I know there are people out there that love Backspacer and love it. More power to you. Hope they play it for you at the next show you go to. But I can't see them bringing this back. Like, I don't think there's any... No one's ever made a sign for Johnny Guitar and brought it to a show. I mean, like, I don't think...
Now I'm going to fucking start.
Good luck. But I think the response, if they played it, would be like, really? That one? Put this in the category of, I don't think it's ever coming back.
I'm on a mission now.
Good luck.
I went from
you've got
having
you
my
got
moment.
Your one thing, now you need another thing.
Well, I mean, that's why people bring these signs to shows. And honestly, like, there's some signs for songs that you're like, okay, well, that is possible, but truly, you got to try the impossible sometimes. And while I don't think it'll ever come back, I think there are better songs off Backspacer to bring back, and they sound check with Speed of Sound. I think that's a perfect one to figure out how to get in the set. But maybe I've changed a tune on it. Who the hell knows?
Someday that Backspacer album show will happen.
I just need Supersonic. That's all I need.
Hmm.
But anyway, Ed's barely alive to close out this main set. It's a good closer, but I'm gonna steal a quote from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Johnny kick a hole in momentum here. Just weird. And Alive is out of place within the bread and butter. It's happening very early, so that's gonna change up the end of the show a little bit. And I actually enjoy that aspect, but yeah, Johnny Guitar into Alive leaves a lot to be desired, unfortunately.
Yeah, it changes the feel of it. I mean, where Alive is usually like the celebration and like you've been through this whole show, you've been through 22, 23, 24 songs, and it's like the celebration, like we did it, we got through it, and it's coming to an end soon, so you want to like grab onto every moment of it and like hold on to it as long as you can. And this is after Johnny Guitar, and it's a completely different feeling of it. It felt fun. I mean, that's kind of you mentioned like Corduroy kind of changing the feel of the show. And I think Johnny Guitar definitely did that and put a little bit more of that kind of Backspacer energy, more lightheartedness. It felt like they were having fun with it. I got nothing against the version, but in a show with some very weird 1-2 runs, this is right up there with them.
All right, encore time, pausing for station identification, and talk about a little bit of what we're doing on Patreon, which is unfortunately coming to a little bit of a close after the Ohana shows. And yeah, we'll be back and we'll do some cool things for Australia and New Zealand as well. And hopefully all of you down under will get involved and get to hear those reaction episodes. But before we talk a little bit more about that, let's thank all the people that, and yes, this is after I posted about the Philly show. A lot of people, I guess, saw it and said, I want to listen to this episode because I told the full story. So let's thank all the people that wanted to hear Brain to J. And that starts with the J Man, Jackie, Elena Lobo, Annie, Chris Howgate, Lisa Lamb, Chris Nevin, and Lisa Serratis. Thank you to all of you for helping out and now being part of our Patreon community. And we hope that as time goes along, that you guys will check out our other content outside of the reaction episodes, because again, they go away as the band takes a little bit of time off. That means we have to fill in the gaps in places, which we will. Javier's got some Gear Garage stuff. We'll see if Evolution comes back into play in the latter part of the year. We'll see if that happens. But we thank you guys, and we thank you guys for the support. We can really use it right now. So hopefully you guys get to stick around and hear what we got to do next. But if you're listening right now and you want to support the show financially and keep us running, because if you notice, we don't have any commercialization in this podcast. That's kind of a nice thing, right? That we're not talking about like Hello Fresh or, any blue pills or anything like that. Part of staying alive as a podcast and part of being able to fund this whole thing is the PBS way, with help from viewers like you. So if you guys are able to help us, we stay afoot and we give you some content in return as well. And who knows, maybe we'll make tote bags or something in the future. That's if you pester me on that, maybe I'll get myself up to it and we'll do it. But we got some stuff and thoughts about the future on merch and stuff like that. So if you would like to support, it is patreon.com/live on four legs, or you can go and download the Patreon app and search for Live on Four Legs, and you can get it that way, or you can go to liveonfourlegs.com. A lot of good Concertpedia articles are out now. You can definitely read about all the Philly shows, the MSG shows, Baltimore. The Fenway show's up pretty soon, so that is more content for you. If you're on liveonfourlegs.com, you can click the Become a Patron button at the top, and that's another way to do it. But again, we're not a one-trick pony here. We have way more to offer you than just the reaction episodes. You can go back And as a matter of fact, I've created these little playlists on Patreon where you can go back and listen to, if you want to go through the Bridge School series episodes, if you want to go through the Evolution episodes where we take a song and we talk about the live history of progressing and changing and why the song has become what it's became over the course of 20 or 30 years or so. If you're interested in listening to our late night series with all the performances from the VMAs and David Letterman and SNL, those are available on one cluster. Everything that we have a series on will be available that way. And I think it is an easy way for you guys to search it up. Listen, they're evergreen stuff. We have other episodes as well that focus on like 1991, 1992, 1993 shows that were shorter than the average shows that we put up there. There's great stuff. So if you're in it just for the reaction episodes and you're thinking to yourself, well, what else can they offer? Check out some of the playlists on Patreon. You will not be disappointed by that. I promise you. All right. So without anything else to promote now, because we're kind of off the road, we'll be back for Ohana with some reaction episodes for sure. But now we can just get back into this show and get back into the rock. Ed says, I'm going to say something and our group will agree. It's not like this has been the longest tour, but once you get close enough to home, you start to smell it. You start wanting to get home and to get through the gigs. You sure gave us a reason to play here tonight. You really brought it. Seeing as it's the third time we've played here, the last time being outdoors, when we get a night like this, we make a mental note. It probably won't be that long before we come back. Again, it was only 2 years, but idiots do not book a Calgary show on December 2nd. You will get snowed in and that will happen. And that is probably why they haven't even thought about returning. Visit there in July. You're not going to have any issues. He says this one goes out to anyone who wants it and says hold hands with a significant other or a stranger, and then admits that he was watching preseason hockey. I don't even watch preseason hockey, guys. I'm all baseball up until it's over, and then I can invest in hockey. But the games don't even count yet. But it's crazy that guys beat the shit out of each other. They're beating the holy fuck out of each other right off the bat, and it makes us more appreciative of our job that we can come out here and not get beat up. But it reminded me of this time 18 years ago when we were doing a sound check in somewhere like Australia. McCready during the sound check went crazy like a tornado and then ended up smashing a, quote unquote 1959 Stratocaster. It could have been the 60, but who smashes their guitar in sound check? But back to holding hands, I'd like to sing this one for Patty. Just Breathe, and Just Breathe will go into a song we'll get into a second. This is Just Breathe with the bass. However, I don't have much to say about it. It sounds fine. I need another song in the role in the encores now because this one I think is getting to the limit a little bit. I get it that it means something for a lot of people, and it means something for me as well, but I think that if you overdo it, the meaning kind of gets spoiled on you a little bit. I don't know. And that could be a real bad hot take for some people, but it just, yeah, there's so much else that you can do in the top of the encore. On top of that, to not have the bass while you do it is definitely, it's not helping matters.
Yeah, it's become kind of very saccharine and very overwrought now, which is not usually words that you use to describe Pearl Jam songs. So yeah, it's become like its own monster in that part of the set, no pun intended, with the R.E.M. stuff we're talking about. But the cool thing about this, I thought, he says, after the line, oh, there's so much in this world to make me bleed. He kind of goes off, goes, oh, fucking hockey players. Like, he's still got that on his mind.
Yeah, I like that. Especially, I have grown to love that line so much more after at my wedding band said so much in this world to make me believe. And I stopped them mid dance and stared them down because I was not happy that they just decided to change the song like that. That wasn't the only liberty that they took with the song either.
You don't want to think about people bleeding at your wedding. That's a different kind of thing. That's like a Game of Thrones thing.
That's not the point. The song was written for a reason. The line was written for a reason. Don't change it. Don't take liberties on it. That's not your job, man. Your job is to sing the song that we requested. That's it. Let's just
Everybody's
do
a
it.
purist. Yep.
After the performance, we're going to get another love song here as a request from a guy that's been holding up the sign requesting it. Get a guess throughout this little Canadian run here. So there's a lot of lyrics to it, and they don't play it often. And Ed needs somebody to help hold up the lyrics. So why not invite the guy that has the sign? And the guy comes out and says, "My name is Just Joe." And that for some people might be a very, very deep wrestling cut there, because there was a very short-lived wrestling, and maybe I think he was Canadian too, so maybe it was the guy, who the hell knows, but there was a very short-lived wrestler named Just Joe, and the character was, he was a messenger that went around telling people bad news, and everyone's like, "Who the hell are you?" "Well, I'm just Joe. I'm just Joe, the messenger." And it was very, very short-lived, so that kind of, rekindled that in my mind, I suppose. But yeah, Just Joe. Ed kind of jokes and says, "Well, we'll play it in Edmonton," and the guy kind of laughs it off. But he sets down a stool for him and asks Just Joe to do two things: hold the lyric sheet and take a drink from the wine bottle. And you see Ed peeking a little bit at the sheet while the song is going on, and the crowd audibly reacts once he gets through like the first part of it. I thought that the performance was excellent. This is not a song I go to very often. Just kind of like we were talking about before with Big Wave. I just don't think about it within the grand scheme of Pearl Jam because it is so different. But I don't know, this version, maybe it was because of the story, and maybe because seeing the guy hold up the lyrics on stage just made it that much more compelling. But I guess it just kind of eased Ed, and he's able to nail every single lyric and not think about it. And then the beautiful moment at the end where him and Just Joe have a fun moment singing together, like, that was fun. I don't usually think of a fun moment. It's usually very heartfelt when you think of Parachutes, but this was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it.
I think this is probably one of my favorite songs on Avocado. I think it's underrated, and another one that they hadn't played in 2 years. But I mean, only 23 times, like, only been played, what's that, 5 times since this, like, in an alternate universe, this is a single, and it's getting the Just Breathe treatment. Like, I think this reminds me a little bit of, like, it's kind of a Buckle Up type of thing, and I know a lot of people don't like Buckle Up, but it's got that kind of weird lilt kind of quality to it. I really like the song, and yeah, I was happy to see here. Yeah, I agree, it's a great version, and it should have been played a bunch more.
Further back and forth, the wave will break on me today. And love, wish the world could go again with love. One can't seem to have enough. And whoa, break the sky and tell me what it's for. I'll travel it on my own. And love, what a different life had I not found this love with you.
So Ed says, "I read that there's been no rats in this part of the country in 50 years. How the hell does that happen? Good on them
real.
for keeping a clean town." I'm going to read up on how you can do it so we can figure out how to keep corporations out of U.S. governments. 50 years of no rats is ending right now. And of course, another Philadelphia tie-in with the rats story that really put the Monday Philadelphia show on the map here, because it was really following in a very, very tough spot in the footsteps of just a dynamite and maybe the best show of the tour. Maybe it's not even an argument. The best show of the tour was that first Philly show. And it needed some kind of impromptu moment, like Ed mentioning that they had rats at the Spectrum and then looking to his left and seeing Sign for Rats. Like, how can you not do it after seeing that? And not only that, but it's the lead into Alive. And I thought that was really cool because they never really give it that moment. So it made Rats feel really special. And I think not unlike this version either. I think that the little story about not having rats in Calgary kind of makes this version kind of special too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of like the anti-Pied Piper, like instead of bringing the rats in, they took them out. Yeah, I mean, that Philly show, when Animal and Rats, I think that was kind of like, oh, wow, like they needed that versus. I think you'd gotten Small Town early on, and it would have been a heavy versus night the show before, I believe, but
MSG had 5.
MSG had the heavy versus night, that's right. But it was a nice surprise, and I think it added a lot to that encore, because that was when you got Just Breathe and a song Good Hope, which we've seen a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And then after Crazy Mary going into Animal and then Rats was a nice little way to break that up.
And Crazy Mary too versus era that it was recorded. That's kind of what I think of the song. And that one was truly needed too, because we talked a lot about where the hell has Crazy Mary been, and that really is a Philly song when you think about it, because it's had a lot of massive moments in Philadelphia, including the ghost of Crazy Mary that came out of the speaker to kind of spook them a little bit. And I think they played it in almost every single Philadelphia show after that. So yeah, it was good to see both of those songs. It was good to see the versus songs for sure. And this version of Rats in Calgary is definitely appropriate. Fixer, nothing on it. It only reminded me that we got no got some at this show. That was the only thing that Fixer reminded me of here. Rearview Mirror is going to close the first encore though, and this is a pretty wild bridge. Like, I love Stone's lead in this. I love when Matt kind of takes control a little bit and kind of puts the song in his hands. Jeff is providing a ton of backbone on the rhythm. Mike is trying to get this plucky sound of what feels like maybe like a wah effect, and that sounds pretty good. And then over all that, Ed is starting to do the I will forgive, I won't forget, and you get a big clapping lead in for the bass roll, and off to the races you go with another classic Rearview Mirror.
Yeah, 2011, I think, is a really good year for Rearview Mirror. After this, they went to South America in November, and those versions are just incredible. There's one that goes on for like 12 minutes. I think it might be one of those ones from 2011. Rearview Mirror on a very, very kind of good hot streak in this couple years. It kind of slowed down after 2014, 2016. Like, we haven't seen it kind of rise to that prominence again, but every time they play it, it's still very good. We always say there was for a couple of years, every time it came up, it was like you won't find a bad version, and that still stands. But yeah, anytime you get Forgive, Forget, it's outstanding. And yet, Jeff and Matt on that bridge, that's always what I'm listening for.
Encore 2, and they're not wasting any time. They're going to go right into Jeremy, and that would go into Crazy Mary, as mentioned seconds ago. And Ed said he would need help on Jeremy. Crowd grabs it in the first chorus. Stone, sometimes this happens, that Stone, especially like at the end, is doing this little high-pitched wail that feels like the true rhythm of no Jeremy than regular Jeremy. It doesn't sound like he does that all that often, but when he does, like, it snaps into my mind that he's doing no Jeremy when he does that. It's very similar to what he normally does, but like you can tell specifically that he's doing no Jeremy.
Some things never go away. It's just that little subtle thing that, like, oh yeah, remember when they did that? They haven't lost it even after all those years.
Right? Yeah. Crazy Mary has a nice co-op from Boom and Mike. They really start to challenge each other, put pressure on one another to push the limits, and it's a very, very good version. The Crazy Mary version in Philly, I thought was very, very similar to this, where at the end, the two are just looking at each other and just like, go, you go, no, you go, you go, you go. And I liked the co-ops when they're not trying to fight against each other, and this one felt like they were tag teaming on it.
Yeah, when they both put in the quarters at the same time and hit start on the co-op mode, those are the best ones. And yeah, another one where Mike is toying around a little bit, just having fun, being playful with it, and throwing these little gauntlets down for Boom, and like, all right, what you got? Bring it back. When they link up together, that's when it gets really special.
As we talked about R.E.M. being one of the great bands from the U.S., now we're going to invite two people to the stage that happen to be from another great band from the Great Northwest. They go back a long way with Stone and Jeff, and I've been grateful to have them as friends in my life as well. To play an Iggy and the Stooges song, let's invite Mark Arm and Steve Turner out here, and we get Search and Destroy. Take one, not so great. Mike says, it's right up here. And it says, gives it the old get smart, missed it by that much. And then Mike says, yeah, that was punk. So gotta love the middle of a hockey fight change.
Mm-hmm. Another real quick one that you'll miss if you're not listening for it.
Right. Yeah, was not expecting that. Mark and Ed doing a back and forth on this. They sound like they're having a blast. Usually when you get Mark Arm, Steve Turner on stage, it's kick out the jams, motherfucker. But you got to spread the love throughout Detroit. And Detroit has been significant within Pearl Jam this past week because of Stranglehold. For anybody that listened to last week's podcast, you understand now why they did Stranglehold in Baltimore. I'm so glad that we were able to get that in people's minds and then have a huge payoff on that. That was really great. But also, not being talked about as much, they tagged TVI Stooges song onto Porch. And that kind of came out of nowhere. Crazy. But yeah, I mean, the Motor City scene getting the respect and the love here as it usually does within this latter part of the set where Mudhoney is getting involved with it.
But yeah, Search and Destroy is my favorite Stooges song by far. Like, it's not even close. And I always love when they do this. Like, Kick Out the Jams is a different thing. That's more of like the party, like the Bob O'Reilly style. But Search and Destroy is more Sonic Reducer, like more Leave In Here, like fast, get in, get out. I really love this cover. And Mark Arm does a great job as well.
Says we're going to do this one due to the beginning of the last song and play it for another Canadian because obviously the songwriter of it, Neil Young, fucking up. Stone solo time. Stone obviously gets his solo in Rats. He gets a solo here too. That sounds fantastic. The crowd is all really into it and Ed's getting really into it as well. and you're saying goodbye at this point. You're getting Ledbetter right afterwards. It's interesting because when you get to Ledbetter, there is a line here. He says, I try in my dreams and I hope I get to meet him and tell him what I'm saying. And I wonder what he's referencing. I wonder if he's thinking about Sean again, but it's a different way to skin a cat on that line for sure.
I'm trying to think, like, could that be an REM thing? But like, it doesn't really make sense. And like, it felt like It Happened Today kind of put a cap on that. There wasn't really anything after that. But yeah, who knows? But yeah, two underrated covers. I mean, Fucking Up As Always, just raucous and rowdy. They really, even more than Rockin' in the Free World, even the early versions, they kind of can go into crazy horse mode and really dig into it.
At the end, it says, if you can see what we see from up here, it's very beautiful. And that is how you end this night in Calgary. So let's pick 3 moments that we liked from this. I got 3. I know what my 3 are. What are you going to be?
Well, why don't you go first this time? I've been going first every time.
Oh, because people are anticipating what I'm going to say. But sure,
Hmm.
since I know what I'm going to talk about here, I know what songs I'm going to bring up. I'm going to say number 3 is Parachutes. That might be a first for me on this podcast. My number 2 is going to be Brandon J. That is certainly not a first for me. And one and only time for this one, number 1 is It Happened Today.
My number 3 is going to be Deep. My number 2, let's go Rats at number 2. I think I'm with you. It Happened Today is number 1.
There you go. It's the storyline of the show for sure. And it puts an interesting spot on how to deal with the rating because like we said last week, it's very similar to the Lou Reed storyline that it's fixated on one specific thing. But unlike Lou Reed, it feels like they had a moment for that kind of dominated conversation, but the show was about other things like the hockey fights and stuff like that. I liked this show, but I think they left a little bit something out there that they could have added into this. I can understand why other people like it. I think that it's very solid average. And while I think it deserves, if you want to give it an 8, I'm going to understand that you can give it an 8, but I think it's within the 7.5 category for me. And it's weird because I'd usually say that REM stuff would bump it up a little bit, but yeah, I'm just not quite there, but I think that 7.5 shows should not be ignored, and I think that's kind of where this one fits in.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm in that range. I mean, this obviously it's not a perfect show. It's not going to be up there with like your instant classics and things of the era, but it was fun to listen to, and it went by quickly. It didn't kind of drag on, Fixer notwithstanding. I was really engrossed in it and paying attention, and there's a lot of little things to catch in it, a lot of things that will pay off if you're listening closely, and I think that deserves a little bit of credit. And I think there's enough here to go back to that I think if you haven't listened to this one in a while, you'll have a good time. So you did spoil it a little bit, but I am right at an 8 on this one.
I think I was just tired of giving shows 8s because it feels like if you like a show enough, then you do give it an 8 because it's like I got nothing wrong with it, and there aren't a lot of shows that really dip under 7. But I might start to get a little like if there's a show like if you put this up against Baltimore, I think I like the Baltimore show better. Yeah, I thought this kind of fit within 7.5, which is fine. Again, like you think of that and you think, oh, well, that's like a C grade or something like that. Don't think of it that way. Just think of
No.
like again, the entertainment purposes only, but think of it as like if you're putting together the list, the master list of where these shows kind of end up, it is within the middle of the pack, I think, with a moment that is going to stand out amongst most of this tour, I should say. The next 2 weeks, we're going to do something that we haven't done because that's all we do is we do stuff that we haven't done. We don't go back to stuff that we've done. That would be pushing forward back. So what we're going to do next week, we're going to do Atlantic City Night 1 from 05. And then the week after that, we are going to do Night 2. Now, that's not how we usually do things here, but it feels like those shows kind of stick out in and of themselves, that you need to tie them together, that you kind of need a part 1 and a part 2. So that's how we're going to do it. And if that works, then maybe we'll try it with other 2-nighters in the future. We'll see how that goes. And if that's something you guys want, then hey, we are more than open to adding it into our repertoire there. But Atlantic City Night 1 will be the first, and that'll come next week. And we will have stuff to talk about. So if you liked what we talked about in this episode and you want to listen to more of that, then make sure you are subscribed on any of the platforms that you can listen to our podcast on. Spotify and Apple and YouTube, well, they're popular. You guys know how to get those from those. But if you like any independent podcast platform that we might be on, then please feel free to subscribe over there and see when our episodes are coming out. Also, if you're there and you have a rating system, feel free to give us a rating. The 5-star ratings definitely help. I don't think we deserve less than that, or else I would be trying very, very hard to get us to that level where we would deserve this. And I think that after 6 years, we've done the work. We know what we're doing. So if you feel like you're on the same page as us, 5 stars would help. A comment would help too. It would help all of the people that are looking for this Pearl Jam podcast and see what it is that maybe it could be for them, that maybe it's something that they desire. So if we can accomplish that, and we've accomplished a whole lot on this tour, then we'd be very, very happy to continue doing it. All right. Until next week, this may be the end. We're here, but not for much longer. And although we may be parting ways, miss you already, miss you always. All right. Atlantic City, what do you got? East Coast bias. We're back doing East Coast shows. So if you like the East Coast, we might hang out there for a couple weeks. But if you don't, then next week we won't. See you on the pod.
Yeah, they blew up the Chicken Man in Philly last night.
It's not possible, I promise. Wish it I could see another woman that will make me rain. Now Johnny, he be having lots of women. Only reason he's married no to him. I'm not nothing good, it's so innocent. Never sent the clothes even when she goes to bed. Every time they go responsible, they know say, get up and work what she is. Oh, I love you, it's always getting clearer. But then it's the home, I have to get to know why she lives. And I sleep with the light on, in case she sleep with the light on, in case she. Cause I was waiting on a dream. She gets I don't listen to this song cause it sucks. She leaned over the bed and looked up on my head. She asked if I'd seen her, Johnny. Oh, I had my disappointment. Cause for years I have been hoping. Oh yeah, I have been hoping that when she came, she would come for me. Cause for you said I've been hoping that she keeps me coming just for me. I'm disappointed cause for you I haven't hoping that when she came, she be coming.